Let's speak now to our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who can join us from outside Scotland Yard. And, Paul, I'm just looking at the list that Sadiq Khan has sent to the Commissioner. It's a pretty long one. He really wants to know what on earth was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, he does. In fact, I'm just going through it myself, Mark. Let's just go through it together. So he wants essentially an inquiry into the arrests of these Republic protesters on Saturday, and he said that a number of lines of inquiry he wants to see established: the arrest of 6 members of the group, why the arresting officers did not appear to know or take into account of the liaison Republic had undertaken with the Met in advance of the event. And we know Graham Smith, the CEO of Republic, says that for months they'd been in touch with the Met beforehand, telling them what they were going to do, when they were going to do it, and that he had received reassurances from the Met that they knew about this and that they understood that there would be no sort of interference with the coronation. So that's one line of inquiry that Sadiq Khan wants them to undertake. Also, why the protest liaison officer was not part of the decision-making process on the arrests or even contacted, why there was not a faster resolution in respect of these arrests following the initial decision to arrest. Remember, they were held for 16 hours by the Met before being released without charge. What role the new legislation played in the arrests, what liaison took place with Westminster City Council after the arrest of the Night Star volunteers. These were the volunteers that were arrested under suspicion of having rape alarms that the police suggested they might have used during the coronation. They've been released on bail, and what briefing was provided to officers who were drafted in from outside of the Westminster Borough area to ensure they were aware of the local partnership arrangements in relation to those Night Star volunteers. And he says that he wants to see a review undertaken by Mark Rowley, who has come out in support of his officers. Yeah, now it's interesting because, of course, we've had David Davis, the senior Tory MP, asking for the Home Affairs Committee to look at the Public Order Act itself and to actually assess whether that was fit for purpose. But what Sadiq Khan is saying is the policing now on the ground, particularly this point about why was there not a faster resolution in respect to these arrests following the initial decision? Because, of course, Graham Smith, I think, was detained for some 16 hours before being arrested. We had in total 64 arrests and only 4 charges in the initial hours. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the way the police carried out their operation here, and Sadiq Khan scrutinising that police operation. Questions have been raised, as you say, by David Davis about the legislation itself, and indeed Sir Peter Fahey, the ex-Greater Manchester police chief, has said that officers were left to interpret the law passed only a few days before the coronation, and that, in his words, the law was poorly defined and far too broad. But we've heard from Rishi Sunak this morning saying that, look, we've put in place the legislation to give the police powers. It's not for government to interfere with the police operation. However, we know that that is under the remit of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, so he is now effectively putting real emphasis, real scrutiny on the operation of the police on Saturday when it comes to the arrest of these protesters, and indeed why it wasn't resolved sooner. And in terms of scrutiny, of course, we and other media outlets have been asking the Met Police for an interview so that we can speak to the Commissioner. That's been declined, as we understand, so far. But he then takes this decision to write an article for the Evening Standard, London's evening newspaper, where he's talked about much of ill-informed commentary, which is wholly inaccurate, where he's not even been putting himself up, if you like, to be challenged on those issues himself. Yeah, it's a very lengthy statement. It is very defensive in its tone, and he comes out backing the officers, talking about the huge police operation, the security operation that was in place, and that the Met Police are not saying that there is a zero tolerance approach when it comes to demonstrations, just that there was a low tolerance. So it's supportive of his officers. It is defensive in its tone. And Mark Rowley, one would assume, since the Met Police are not putting anyone up for interview today, would hope that that would be the end of it. But just down the road from us at City Hall, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan saying that he wants an inquiry and essentially putting it back in Mark Rowley's court.